Hey, I'm FamousLast Words, and this is my Season 14 Nilah guide. Last season I placed rank 1 in North America on the champion, so it makes me feel quite overqualified to share my opinions on the character and her state in the game right now. So to quantify what to do with the champion this new season, we have to look at what the champion's strengths and weaknesses are inherently and how they interact with the new things that came in this season. Nilah is a non-traditional AD carry. She's melee, as many of you know, and she has a lot of strengths and weaknesses that other characters don't. She gets bullied pretty hard early because she is melee, and her damage doesn't really get strong until she can get around the first item spike. Now, to compensate for these weaknesses of not really having a control in the early stages of the game, she has some of the most broken tools in the game. She has two dashes, which is extremely uncommon for an AD carry, and her W is one of the best defensive tools in the game, and she can give it to her entire team. And she has an ultimate that can act as engage and follow up, and it's so powerful that it can single-handedly win fights. She gets free XP, and she gets free healing and armor pin from her crit. That is ridiculous. That is a lot of tools, and they're all completely game breaking. Now, to make this champion strong, you have to be able to maximize all of her strengths. And if you can maximize them, this champion can be a completely unkillable demon character. You just have to know how to make her strong and how to get there. The key to making this champion strong is to nullify her weaknesses as much as possible. So to make up for the fact she'll have to run up and tank a couple of hits usually to interact with champions, I think Ghost and Flash is usually the best setup for summoner spells. Although if you're fighting high DPS mobile ADCs, I recommend bringing Exhaust over Ghost. Good examples would be champions like Draven. And to make it more clear, I'll just put up a visual chart for when to bring Ghost and when to bring Exhaust. Despite all her complexities, luckily her rune pages are pretty simple. You just bring Conqueror with Triumph, and sometimes you bring Overheal if it's Enchanter versus Enchanter lanes like Sona, Soraka, stuff like that. You're going to want to go Bloodline. Sometimes you go Tenacity if they have a lot of hard CC and you need it, and Last Stand every single time. Now, for secondaries and poke lanes, you're going to want to go Second Wind Revitalize. There's pretty much no variation there for poke lanes. You're really going to need that extra HP, and sometimes you even want to bring Doran's Shield to survive that poke. In every other situation, though, I recommend going Boots and Biscuits, because Boots is extremely gold efficient as a rune, and Biscuits gives you a lot of sustain, because sometimes Nilah can have mana problems managing waves, because she gets pushed out and she has to farm with Q. I think the biggest change for this champion this season is going to be her itemization, because Burst is a very big part of this season. You know, you see Rengar's jumping up one-shotting, you see Diana's coming from the sky with the fucking Storm Surge item, that stupid fucking item. So you need to fit in a lot more things that help you survive all this burst. Damage has never been higher in League, and it is rough for Nilah. I'm not gonna lie. It's a little bit rough, but I promise it's worth it if you put the time in for this character. Now, to qualify what items are good on the champion, first I just want to look at what are the absolute best stats for this champion. So I just put like a tier list chart here for all the stats you want on the character. S tier, AD and crit, you want those stats. That's the bread and butter of this champion. You want lots of crit on Nilah because the entire thing that compensates for her being a shitty melee AD carry is the crit passives. The crit passives are so crazy. It makes it so you don't even have to build Lord Dominic's late game sometimes on this character, which you have to on every other AD carry. Crit is so good. And then on A tier, I have lifesteal, move speed, and then lethality slash penetration. So these ones are core tier fighting patterns, which is why I think they're very good. It lets you do lots of damage and heal lots. You just weave throughout and deal with all these mobile ass characters, assassins going around one-shotting you. And then in B, I have health and resistances. Sometimes you need durability on this character. It's not a choice because you are melee, after all. And you're not like Darius, where your base stats are, you have 100 armor and MR at level 11. You actually have to go in and fight. Sometimes you need it. And then for C tier, I just have attack speed and CDR. These stats aren't the best on Nilah, but incorporating a little bit of it in your builds can be very strong. The reason these stats aren't particularly amazing in the first place is that the thing with attack speed is you don't really want to buy it because you already have a lot built in on your queue. And CDR, although very good, you don't need a lot of it, especially when we relate to the best item for this character, the very best item, which is Navori Quickblade. This item is so insanely broken. It was broken last season. It's still broken this season. They barely changed it. This item is completely ridiculous on Nilah. And the reason you don't want to buy the CDR is because Navori Quickblade gives percent reduction on your attacks, right? So, and if you buy CDR, you're being less efficient with Navori Quickblade's passive. Because you auto attack like 4 or 5 times in a fight, and you're going to have your W off cooldown already. You're going to have your dashes all the way back and ready to fight. Navori Quickblades is the key to Nilah. It's the key to a lot of champions. Navori Quickblades is one of the best items in the game. And Nilah is a strong abuser of this crazy item. Now, aside from that, the other very good items on this character are going to be Sundered Sky, the new item. It lets you weave all the way between fights, just hitting people and getting the health procs. It just synergizes with Nilah's kit a lot very well. A lot of people haven't caught onto this yet, but I think this will probably become the meta for Nilah, is Sundered Sky. Collector was really good last season. Collector's still very good. Eclipse. Now you can build Eclipse with Navori Quickblade since they're no longer mythics. Eclipse was always a good item on Nilah, but it was never worth sacrificing Navori for. But now you can just get the best of both worlds. And Shield Bow. Newly buffed this season. Shield Bow is a very good item. I love Shield Bow. It helps you sustain fights on Nilah. It's very solid. Love Shield Bow. Now let's get to the more situational, not as good items. So, in the first place of this, I'm going to have Death's Dance. Death's Dance is an extremely good item, especially in this season, this very, very high damage season. Death's Dance is good because it lets you weave between fights and sustain all the burst. And because Nilah's melee, she gets the full benefit of the item, which other AD carries can't do. Very good. Highly recommend Death's Dance if you're getting bursted a lot. Now, Maw of Mortalitas, it's the same thing, but just if you're, like, there's a lot of AP assassins on the enemy team. You know, your Dianas, your Evelyns, your Echoes, the stuff that's running the Rift right now. Now, Lord Dominic's and Mortal Reminder are both pretty good items on Nilah. They're not fully efficient because of her crit passive, but if you're fighting tanky teams, which, you know, to be fair, it's not very common right now, but if you're lucky and you're fighting these tanky teams, Lord Dom's and Mortal Reminder aren't bad options. Now, right behind it is Terminus. This item, although it's considered a penetration item, if you're against a bunch of assassins, fights won't last long enough for you to get the full effectiveness of the item. You're not going to get it fully stacked. The resistances are nice. It's good for weaving between fights. Terminus is a pretty good item. Pretty good item. Right behind it is Guardian Angel. You know this item. This item's an AD carry classic. Late game in the fights, it can single-handedly win if they all decide they want to hop on you and blow you up for no particular reason. You can actually live. Guardian Angel's still good. Always will be. And then behind that is, this one might be a surprise to a lot of you, Abyssal Mask. Abyssal Mask has been so insanely broken. It's been so broken for so long. Abyssal Mask is ridiculous. You steal so much MR, you become like invulnerable to magic damage. The only problem with it is that it doesn't exactly give you the stats you want, but the fact it's so cheap and so efficient makes me have to recommend it if you have other magic damage dealers on your team. Which you will. You will in this season. Abyssal Mask, very, very strong item. Right behind it might be another surprise for you guys. Redemption. There are some enchanter items that I can nichely recommend on Nilah because of the heal and shield power it gives, and the fact that Nilah's running in. running in, slapping around with the fights. Redemption fits that playstyle very well. You've seen it other times with Redemption Olaf or whatever in the jungle. Um, Not many people have caught on to these enchanter items being strong on Nilah, but they are nichely good, I believe. And then behind it's Mercurial Scimitar, whatever. You're fighting Malzahar, you're fighting Warwick, you're fighting Mordekaiser. You're going to need this item to just not get focused down in fights. Now here are the much more niche items. These ones are more situational, but sometimes you just need to squeeze them in your build for very specific purposes. At the top, I have Stridebreaker. This was also a mythic last season that was like right behind Shield Bow and Eclipse for viability on the character. It's decent on Nilah, and some games you might need it. Like, if they're running an extremely mobile team that dashes away from you all the time, you're going to need some way to catch up to them besides Ghost and Flash. So I can recommend Stridebreaker in some situations. Right behind it is Bloodthirster. Sometimes you need a filler crit item just because you really need crit on Nilah, and Bloodthirster's okay at that. I think Shield Bow is just a better option in the large majority of games. Randuin's Omen, yeah, assassins are broken. Okay, we already know that. Lethality's broken. This just gives you a shit ton of armor, a shit ton of health, and it'll let you survive some burst. Randuin's Omen is good against all these AD assassins. Then right behind it is Force of Nature. I find this a little less good than Abyssal Mask due to the price of the item, but it is just going to give you more stats overall. So if you don't think Abyssal Mask will be enough to survive, then you can go Force of Nature. Behind that, I have Mikhail's Crucible. It's a variation off of Redemption. It's another enchanter item. I think Mikhail's can be good in certain situations where you have another carry. Let's say you have a Master Yi. It's very common that you'll have Nilah as a secondary carry in team comps because of how inconsistent her DPS is. Mikhail's Crucible can be decent. It's cheap, efficient, and it lets your team heal and sustain more. Spirit Visage, like I've been saying a lot, the champion heals a lot. Spirit Visage is an item built for the character. My only problem with it and why it's not higher up is that, like, there's just way better magic resist options in the game right now. It's not Spirit Visage's fault. Edge of Night, sometimes if there's only one particular assassin coming to burst you down, Edge of Night can be good, because it'll just give you HP, lethality, AD, all very good stats on Nilah. Solid item overall. And then here's a nicher one, Dead Man's Plate. And I have in quotations here just for late game. Late game on Nilah, you don't really want to sell your boots because you need the mobility. So as a replacement, I usually just sell the boots and buy Dead Man's Plate. It lets you catch up in the fight and, just get straight to swinging without sacrificing that movement speed. And the AD hit passive on Dead Man's Plate does scale with AD. So you're going to get a lot more value out of it than you'd expect from Nilah. And the new passive on Dead Man's is really good. That slow resistance or whatever. It's good on Nilah. And on the last item I can ethically recommend is Phantom Dancer. It's buffed and it's better than last season, but you don't really want it. You don't really want the stats on it, since you don't really need the attack speed on Nilah. So you only want these against comps who are going to be free hitting a lot, without being contested. Thinks, you're fighting tanks, right? You're fighting a Mundo. You're fighting an Ornn. You're fighting, a bunch of bruisers. Aurelia, Darius, whatever. They're running in, coming to kill you. Phantom Dancer can be solid. And it actually has a good synergy with another item, Kraken Slayer, which can be good on Nilah, but I just think in the current state of the game, it is not worth buying. Don't buy Kraken Slayer. Now, before I tell you what builds I recommend for the character, I would just like to note that your build should only have one non-crit item for your first 4 items, which most of the time is going to be Sundered Sky for your first item. Sundered Sky is a very good rush item on Nilah. But if you need a utility item later on, because the Echo is 18 kills and you need a Maw of Mortalitas to survive, then you just go a Collector first into Navori, and then you go the items after. You know, you'll go the non-crit item after. You save it for later. Crit is very, very, very important on Nilah. That is the thing that makes this champion broken. If you're not building crit on Nilah, she is not worth playing. This champion would be so shit without that crit passive. So make sure to maximize it. Now, for core builds, there's only really two I recommend right now, and I've kind of already said them. But your snowball build or your more scaling build is going to be Collector, Navori, Eclipse, or a different utility item. I think Eclipse is generally the best, and then a shield bow after. And then for the fights where you're not getting instant blown up, you know, the 1 to 100 games, just go Sundered Sky, Navori, shield bow, and, you know, build a couple more crit items after that. I'll put the builds up on screen, the ones I recommend, the paths and everything. But yeah, that's what I recommend for the champion. Overall, I think after the nerfs Nilah got last season and the removal of Gale Force, Nilah has gotten weaker than last season, but she's still definitely a viable champion. And I think after the 80 carry meta shifts a little bit away from poke, she'll definitely become stronger. And if you're good at the champion and good at maximizing her tools, you're just going to climb no matter what. So even though this champion's kind of hated and unpopular, I really love Nilah. And I want to put these guides out to have more Nilah players. I want there to be more competition. I want people to see the strength of this character. She is actually strong. She has been strong for a while, but people need to learn how to play her better. I hope this guide has been helpful, and good luck on your climbs this season.